Hope was never gentle in Frostborn lands. It arrived dressed as law, as elders with silver braids and measured voices, as oaths spoken beneath moonlight that promised order and justice, while teaching wolves exactly who could be sacrificed to preserve the illusion of both. Rosalind had believed in that order once. She had polished ceremony stones, memorized ancestral names, and held her belly with both hands while telling her unborn pup she would be born into a pack that protected its own. On the night of the Moon Oath gathering, she learned how quickly a community could turn ritual into theater and truth into smoke. The sacred clearing glittered under a hard white moon, ringed with carved standing stones and watching faces. Breath fogged in front of every mouth. Torches hissed in iron brackets. Rosalind stood in the center in a winter blue dress that no longer fit over 8 months of pregnancy, her fingers swollen, her spine aching in a steady line of pain that had become background noise weeks ago. She had been summoned without explanation. That alone told her something was wrong. Sebastian Windrider walked into the circle with deliberate, calm, dark cloak swinging behind him, his father's signet ring bright on his hand, though the old alpha still lived. He did not look at her belly first. He looked at the crowd, making sure they were attentive, then at the elders, ensuring their silence, and only then at her, as if she were an item to be presented. "Rosalind Frostborn," he said, voice carrying cleanly to the tree line. "You stand accused of poisoning Alphagaric Windrider and carrying messages to rival wolves through your bed." Her lungs locked. For one suspended second she did not understand the words, only the sound of them, the shape of public ruin in his mouth. Then the clearing erupted in low, shocked murmurs. "That is a lie," she said, and hated how thin it sounded. Sebastian tilted his head, sorrow carved onto his features with practiced precision. "I took you into my household. I offered you protection when no one else would. This is how you repay me." He turned, lifted a clay tablet, and held it so torchlight caught the etched lines. Her confession. Witnessed. Rosalind stared at symbols she could not read from where she stood, then searched the elder row for anyone willing to question it. Elder Morel kept her gaze fixed on the moonstone basin. Elder Tomas rubbed his thumb over his prayer beads and said nothing. Her mother stood in the second row, shawl wrapped tight, eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. When Rosalind met her gaze, her mother looked down. The first bead was taken from Rosalind's collar by Elder Tomas, a carved white rank bead, polished smooth by years of wear. Then another, then another. Each one dropped into a bronze bowl with a small, brutal click. "By council assent," Morel announced, voice brittle with ceremony, "Rosalind Frostborn is stripped of rank, denounced for oath betrayal, and rejected from Windrider protection." Sebastian stepped forward for the formal words. "I reject you before Pack and Moon. You will carry no name of mine, claim no shelter of mine, and receive no defense from my line." Her palms went cold, her knees threatened to buckle. The child shifted sharply under her ribs, as if startled by the roar of voices that followed. "Traitor. Liar. She poisoned him. Look at her stomach. Traitor's womb." Rosalind pressed a hand to her belly and lifted her chin because she had nothing else left. "I never touched your father's cup," she said to Sebastian, "and you know whose child this is." Something ancient looked out through his eyes then, not grief, not shame, only calculation. "You should have thought of that before you chose disgrace." 2 guards took her by the elbows. She flinched, not from pain but from the certainty that every face she had known since childhood would watch and do nothing. She turned one last time to her mother. "Please." Her mother's lips trembled. She did not move. Inside Rosalind, thought fractured and flooded all at once. "I am still standing. I am not fainting. I am not begging him again. My child can feel this terror and I cannot stop it. I keep breathing, 1 count in, 1 count out, while they peel me out of my own life like rotten bark." They want me to agree to the story so they can sleep. They want me small enough to carry their version of what happened. If I speak now, they will call it hysteria. If I stay silent, they will call it confession. There is no right shape to survive this. There is only movement. There is only getting through the next minute without falling. I used to think belonging was earned by obedience. I see it now for what it is in this circle. Permission, granted and revoked by men who fear any woman who remembers her own mind. They marched her past the last torch line, across packed snow that burned through worn boots, and through the winter boundary where ward stakes were carved with old runes. One guard yanked her cloak, tearing it against a thorned post when she stumbled. He did not help her untangle it. "Keep walking," he said. The second guard spat at her feet. "If you cross back, we hunt." Behind her, from wolves she could no longer see, the chant rose again, thin and cruel in the wind. Traitor's womb. By dawn, she had stopped hearing individual words and started hearing rhythm. Accusation had a cadence. Exile had a sound. The first day beyond the boundary, she found no shelter, only scrub pines bent under ice, and a dry creek bed half clogged with stone. She drank meltwater from cupped hands and retched it up. Her ankles swelled. Her back cramped so sharply she had to kneel in snow until the wave passed. Twice she thought she heard pursuit. Twice it was only branches cracking under frost weight. By the second night she understood the deliberate structure of her banishment. They had sent her out with just enough clothing to claim mercy, and not enough provisions to survive weather, labor, and wolves. If she died, she would become a cautionary tale. If she lived, she would remain a warning. 3 nights after the moon oath, the sky cleared to black glass and bright stars, and fear finally took a shape she could outrun. She was crouched behind a fallen cedar, trying to rub warmth into her fingers, when voices drifted through the trees. Male. Young. Windrider cadence. She cannot be far. Orders said no body near the border markers. If she crawls into Stormborn land, we lose leverage. Rosalind went still. Snow slid down the cedar trunk against her shoulder. Leverage. Not mercy. Not honor. Leverage. They needed her alive enough to move and weak enough to seize. A sharp cramp cinched low in her abdomen. She hissed and pressed both hands under her belly, waiting for it to pass. It did, leaving a cold sweat across her neck. Panic, she told herself. Just panic. Another voice, closer now. Tracks split here. She rose too fast, dizzy, and stumbled into the brush. Branches slapped her face. Ice broke beneath her boots with brittle snaps that sounded thunderous in the dark. She stopped trying to move quietly and started trying to move at all, one hand on tree trunks for balance, breath tearing in her throat. The world narrowed to white ground and black trunks and the relentless pull in her body, tightening, releasing, tightening again. I can keep going. I can keep going. I am not giving birth in snow while they drag me by the wrist. I am not letting them decide who touches my child first. Left foot, right foot, breathe. If this is labor, I am not ready. If this is fear, it is swallowing me whole. Keep moving. A boundary stone appeared ahead, half buried, marked with the spiral and crown sigil of Stormborn territory. Crossing into another Alpha's land without leave carried penalties that could end in execution. Behind her, a shout broke open the trees. There! She crossed anyway. The ground dropped steeply beyond the marker. Rosalind slid down an icy incline, hit one knee hard, and nearly blacked out when a contraction seized her from spine to pelvis with blinding force. This one did not feel like panic. This one had purpose. Snowflakes began to fall, slow and sparse, touching her lashes and melting. She crawled behind a boulder veined with quartz and listened. The voices behind the marker faded, then stopped. Windrider wolves would not breach Stormborn land without command. Not yet. Relief arrived too quickly and tipped into shaking. She laughed once, A broken sound, then clamped a hand over her mouth as another contraction built. She counted breaths. Lost count. Pressed her forehead to cold stone. When she lifted her head, a shadow stood 10 paces away. Not a man. A wolf. Enormous black fur silvered by moonlight, shoulders taller than her hip even while he stood still. His amber gaze fixed on her with unnerving intelligence, ears angled forward, body coiled with contained power. No growl, no lunge, just watchfulness. Rosalind reached for the knife she no longer had, found only torn cloth and empty air, and swallowed a sob that tasted like iron. "If you mean to kill me," she whispered, "do it before the next one." The wolf stepped closer and lowered his head, nostrils flaring. His gaze dropped to the blood on the snow beneath her, then rose to her face. A low rumble rolled from his chest. Not threat, not comfort. Something older and harder to name. Another contraction hit, fierce enough to fold her over. She cried out, and the world tilted. When her vision cleared, the wolf was gone. In his place stood a man in dark leathers and a fur-lined cloak, bareheaded in the snow, amber still threaded through his irises like banked fire. Lucien Stormborn, the alpha king wolves whispered about when they wanted children to obey, ruthless in battle, unbending in law, enemy by every border oath carved into her bones. He knelt, one knee in the snow, and looked at her, as if she were neither scandal nor spoils, only a woman on the edge of collapse with life demanding passage through her body. "Do not fight me," he said, voice low and steady. "You are in labor." She tried to answer and failed. Lucien slid one arm behind her shoulders, the other beneath her knees, and lifted her as carefully as if she were made of glass and stormlight. Lucien Stormborn moved uphill through the trees with long, unbroken strides, as if the storm itself had decided to carry her. Rosalind could feel every contraction through the shield of his arms, each one a steel band tightening across her spine, and she hated the helplessness of being held even while her body sagged into the only warmth she had known in days. Snow struck his shoulders and vanished in the heat rolling off him. His scent reached her between pain waves, cedar resin, and cold air before lightning, clean and wild and unsettlingly steady. "Put me down," she whispered, though she could barely form the words. "No. I crossed without leave. You crossed alive." His voice did not rise. "That is what matters." A howl answered from somewhere ahead, low and carrying. Another returned from farther left. Signals, she realized, not random calls, confirmation. Movement swelled through the forest around them, boots on crusted snow, the muted shift of wolves keeping pace out of sight. Stormborn patrols had found their king with a bleeding exile in his arms and were choosing whether this was a rescue or a breach. The trees opened onto a ridge path carved into black stone. Beyond it, the Stormborn fortress rose from the mountain like it had grown there, all slate towers and rune-cut walls, torchlight burning behind narrow windows. Iron gates stood between two carved wolf pillars taller than any pines below, their mouths open in silent warning. Rosalind had heard Windrider's stories about this place since she was old enough to sort fear from fact. She had never expected to see it through a blur of pain, wrapped in an enemy alpha's cloak. By the time they reached the gate arch, the snow had thickened from scattered flakes to a steady curtain. Guards dropped to one knee when they recognized Lucien, then froze when they saw her. Their gazes snapped to her belly, the blood darkening her hem, her frostborn braid cord still tied at the end of her hair like a memory no one could strip. One guard, broad-shouldered with a scar at his jaw, looked ready to object. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "she bears Windrider scent." "She bears my protection," Lucien replied. "Open." The guard hesitated half a breath too long. Lucien's expression did not change, but the air around him tightened with command so absolute, Rosalind felt it along her skin. "Now." Iron groaned. The gate split apart. Inside the first courtyard, wolves moved with military precision despite the hour. Stable hands, sentries, runners. Every face turned. A woman in healer gray came down the steps 2 at a time, silver braids pinned under a wool hood, hands already gloved. "Labor?" she asked. "Active," Lucian said. "How far apart?" Rosalind clenched her jaw through another wave. "I stopped counting when your king decided I was cargo." The healer blinked, then surprised Rosalind with a short, humorless snort. "Good. She can still bite." She lifted her chin toward 2 attendants. "Hot water, birthing kit, clean linens. Move." The attendants obeyed instantly. Rosalind grabbed at Lucian's cloak when he shifted her higher in his arms. "If this is a prison wing, I walk." A flicker crossed his face then. Not anger, not pity. Something sharper. "If you could walk, you would have collapsed 10 times before the ridge. You are going to the infirmary because your child needs a safe birth." "My child?" His gaze held hers. "Yes." They crossed an inner corridor warmed by banked hearths and rune lamps set into stone niches. Heat made her shiver harder. Her body had been cold for so long it no longer trusted comfort. She tracked exits on instinct, measured door widths, counted guards. None touched her. None came close unless Lucian nodded. "I am in enemy walls. I am in labor. I am not chained. But I am carried, and that feels too close to surrender. Breathe, stay awake, watch everything." The left corridor leads downward, maybe barracks. The healer keeps glancing at my hands, not my throat, which means she sees patient before politics. Hold on to that. Hold on to anything that is not panic. My daughter is turning, pressing, asking for room my bones cannot give. I will not let strange hands claim her first cry. I will not vanish inside another man's story. If I have one breath left when this ends, it will be mine to spend. Lucian shouldered open double doors with his back and entered the infirmary. Warmth wrapped around Rosalind all at once, herb steam and beeswax and clean linen. Shelves lined one wall with labeled jars. A birthing bed had already been prepared near the hearth, thick blankets folded at its foot. Efficiency, not chaos. Someone had trained these people for emergencies and expected obedience. The healer took one look at Rosalind's face and pointed. "Set her there." Lucian lowered her with maddening care, one hand braced behind her shoulders until she settled. She tried to pull away and nearly cried out when a contraction caught her halfway upright. "Easy," the healer said, hands sure at Rosalind's pulse and belly. "I am Healer Anwen. You and I are going to get this child here safely. Can you tell me your name?" Rosalind's laugh came out thin. "Depends who is asking." "Woman to woman," Anwen said, "not counsel to witness." "Rosalind Frostborn." Anwen's mouth tightened at the surname, then smoothed. "All right, Rosalind. Drink." She held a cup to her lips. Willow bark, mint, something mineral. Rosalind swallowed because refusing now would punish only herself. At the doorway, 2 captains had appeared, both armed, both watching Lucian instead of her. "Your Majesty," one said, "Council will demand quarantine protocol. Windrider has already sent runners alleging—" Lucian did not raise his voice. "No one enters without my leave. No one removes her from this room. If Council objects, they can wait until daylight and object to my face." The captain inclined his head and withdrew. Rosalind pressed a hand to her belly and exhaled through clenched teeth as another contraction climbed. The room narrowed to heat and pressure, and the rough weave of blankets against her palms. Anwen checked her progress, murmured instructions, called for more hot water. Lucian remained by the bed but outside reach, a deliberate distance that should have comforted her. It did not. She hated that she wanted him closer. A sharper wave hit, tearing a sound from her throat she had not meant to make. Her vision swam. She reached for the bed frame and missed. Lucian moved on instinct, catching her forearm before she slid. His palm closed over her skin, steady, warm, calloused. The world split open. A gold-white surge raced from the point of contact up her arm and through her chest. Not pain, not heat. Something older and precise as a key turning in a lock hidden under bone. Her pulse lurched, doubled, then found a second rhythm beneath it, strong and relentless, answering hers. The room smell vanished under a new current that flooded her senses. Cedar, frost, stormlight, male and wild and known in a way that made no sense. Lucian drew a sharp breath. Anwen looked up fast. "My king?" He did not answer her. Amber bled into his irises until his gaze looked lit from within, predator and man fused for a suspended heartbeat. His fingers tightened once around Rosalind's arm, then loosened as if he feared he might hurt her. Rosalind stared at him, unable to blink. No, this cannot be real. I was discarded 3 nights ago in front of everyone who ever named me kin. I am marked as ruin, as shame, as a body to be used for leverage. I am in labor in a rival fortress with blood on my skin and fear in my mouth, and my own heartbeat is reaching for his like it has waited years to do it. I know this scent. I know this pull. My instincts are rising to meet him before my pride can build a wall. If this is fate, it is cruel. If this is mercy, I do not trust it. I cannot survive another bond that turns into a chain. I cannot hand my daughter to hope dressed in a crown. And still, when he looks at me, the terror eases for one treacherous second. Home is not a place, I think. It is a body that does not flinch from your wounds. Anwen's gaze flicked between them, comprehension dawning slowly, then all at once. She stepped back, giving space no one had asked for aloud. Lucian released Rosalind only to turn his hand and offer it again, palm up, a choice instead of a grip. His voice dropped, roughened by disbelief and reverence braided together. Rosalind. Another contraction built, brutal and undeniable, but she did not look away. Do not kneel to me out of guilt. A faint, startled huff escaped him, almost a laugh at the edge of shock. I have never knelt from guilt in my life. He went down anyway, one knee to stone beside her bed, broad shoulders bowed not in submission to weakness, but in recognition of power he could not command. The runes inked along his wrist glimmered once beneath his skin and faded. Mine, he said quietly, then corrected himself with visible effort. Mine, if you choose it. The words struck deeper than accusation ever had, because they held no demand. Rosalind's breath shook. Her fingers hovered over his open hand, then settled into it as the next wave of labor crashed through her, and their eyes locked, amber and storm gray, neither of them pretending this was simple anymore. Their hands stayed joined through the contraction until Rosalind could breathe again without biting through her own tongue. Anwen moved with swift competence, checking her, listening, counting under her breath while the fire snapped and the storm pressed against the shuttered windows. The pain came hard for another hour, then thinned into uneven waves that left Rosalind trembling and furious in equal measure, her body poised for battle that would not yet arrive. She is not ready to push, Anwen said at last, drawing the blanket higher over Rosalind's knees. Stress can force labor forward and then stall it. We watch. We keep her warm. We keep her hydrated. If the pattern strengthens again, we proceed. Rosalind swallowed, throat raw. So I wait. So you gather strength, Anwen corrected gently. Lucian rose from his kneel only when Rosalind let go first. The loss of his touch should have eased her. Instead, it left a strange hollow under her ribs, a quiet ache she did not trust. He seemed to feel it too. His jaw tightened once, and he stepped back to the edge of the hearthlight, giving her room as if space itself could be an offering. Rest, he said. I do not sleep in strange fortresses. His mouth almost curved, not mockery, almost respect. Then close your eyes and glare at me from memory." Anwen snorted while she measured herbs into a cup. "If stubbornness were medicine, neither of you would ever fall ill." Rosalind tried not to smile and failed by a fraction. The moment passed, small and absurd, but it loosened something in her chest that had been clamped shut since the clearing. Anwen gave her a mild draft for pain and exhaustion. No haze, no heavy fog, just enough to quiet the shaking in her muscles. Lucian remained in the room while attendants replaced blood-stained linens and banked fresh coals, yet he never once touched her again without asking. He asked for everything. "May I move this closer? May I call another healer to check the child's position? May I station 2 guards outside rather than 1? Each question landed like a stone dropped into deep water, unsettling because it was so unlike the men she had survived. By the time the corridor bells marked midnight, Anwen had finally bullied Lucian through the door with a promise she would call if contractions sharpened. Rosalind heard his boots pause in the hallway, heard the low exchange with guards, and then silence settled over the infirmary like snow over broken ground. Sleep took her in jagged pieces. In one dream, she stood in the moon oath clearing again with her rank beads in her hands, but when she opened her fingers, they were teeth. In another, Sebastian smiled as he reached for her child, and everyone turned away. She jerked awake with a cry lodged in her throat and a narrow birthing blade clutched in her fist, the point aimed at the nearest shadow. The nearest shadow became Lucian in a single step from darkness into firelight. He stopped immediately, palms open. The 2 guards behind him reached for weapons. Lucian did not look back when he spoke. "Out. My king, she has a blade. And she is frightened. Out." The door shut. Rosalind's breath came fast and shallow. She did not lower the blade. Lucian studied her from several paces away, then deliberately sat on the stone floor beside the far wall, broad shoulders resting against it, knees bent, making himself smaller in the room that already answered to him. "I am going to tell you what is warded," he said. "Listen and decide what you want." She said nothing. Her hand shook hard enough the blade glinted. "The windows are sealed against entry, not against exit. If you wish to leave through one, the ward will not stop you. The main door locks from inside only. There is a bell cord by your right hand that calls Anwen, not soldiers. 2 guards remain outside, under order to enter only if you call for help, or if I command it." His voice never pushed. It paced, steady as a drumbeat meant to anchor panic. "There is no sedative in your water. No chain under the bed frame, no binding rune on your wrist or throat. The sigil above the hearth dampens pain surges in labor and nothing else. If you want every ward stripped, I will strip them." Rosalind stared at him, trying to reconcile the feared Alpha King with a man sitting on cold stone because she had awakened armed and half feral with terror. "Why?" she asked hoarsely. "Are you doing this?" He held her gaze. "Because control taken from a frightened woman is not protection. It is theft with polite language." The words cut cleanly through the last shreds of nightmare. She lowered the blade by inches, then set it on the blanket, keeping her fingers on the hilt. Inside her mind, thought rose and tangled, too fast to sort and too honest to silence. I am awake in enemy walls with a king at my bedside and a weapon in my hand, and no one has tried to pry my fingers open. I expect the trap because the trap has always come after the kindness, always after the promise, always disguised as concern. If I sleep, I might lose my child. If I trust, I might lose myself. But he is on the floor when he could stand over me. He names every exit. He leaves me the blade. He does not call me dramatic or ungrateful or unstable. He says theft and means it. He speaks like a man who has seen cages built from good intentions and hates them on sight. I do not know what to do with that. I do not know where to put this relief that feels too much like grief. A contraction rolled through her, milder than before, but enough to draw a hiss between her teeth. Lucian shifted as if to rise, then waited when she lifted one hand, torn between instinct and invitation. She nodded once. He came to the bedside and braced the mattress while she breathed through it, his presence solid and quiet. When the pain ebbed, he took 2 steps back again. "Do you want me here?" he asked, "or outside the door?" Rosalind looked at the blade, then at him. "There," she said, pointing to the chair by the hearth, "where I can see you." He sat where she indicated, forearms on his knees, wakeful and still. At gray dawn, Anwen found them in the same positions. Rosalind propped against pillows with the birthing blade within reach, Lucian in the chair with a blanket thrown over one shoulder and his eyes alert despite the sleepless night. She checked mother and child, declared both stable, and bullied Rosalind into broth and oat bread. Rosalind kept it down, to her own astonishment. By the 3rd dawn after her arrival, a pattern had formed that no decree could have forced. Lucian learned which foods did not turn her stomach and sent them without comment. He had her boots warmed by the hearth before she attempted short corridor walks to ease the pressure in her hips. Once, when phantom pain struck hard enough to leave her bent over the windowsill shaking, she found tiny braid charms of cedar thread and moonwort stitched inside her torn cloak hem, wardwork meant to steady nerves and ground breath. No note, no signature. She knew whose hands were large enough to knot cord that neatly anyway. It should have frightened her, this care that arrived without negotiation. Instead, it made her wary in a new way, because gratitude had always been the leash others expected her to wear. Lucian never asked for it. The demand came from council instead. They arrived at midday in a spill of fur-lined authority, 3 matrons in formal silver, 2 scribes, and Captain Rourke with his permanent sneer carved into one corner of his mouth. Anwen positioned Rosalind in a high-backed chair near the infirmary hearth and stood at her shoulder like a quiet wall. Lucian entered last, wearing no crown, only dark leathers and the weight of command that made even seasoned wolves straighten. Matron Elspeth swept her gaze over Rosalind's belly as if appraising livestock. "Your Majesty, we requested this inspection to address security concerns. Housing an enemy broodmare in the royal wing invites instability." The word hit like a slap. Rosalind felt heat pulse beneath her skin, anger and humiliation braided so tightly she tasted metal. Matron Vey added, "Confinement to a lower cell would limit exposure, minimal staff contact, no ceremonial access." Anwen inhaled sharply through her nose. Lucian's expression did not change. That was somehow worse. Matron Sira clasped her hands. "With respect, sire, the woman's history includes suspected poisoning and illicit contact with rivals. Pregnancy does not erase treachery." Rosalind opened her mouth, but Lucian raised one hand slightly toward her, not to silence, to ask for one heartbeat of patience. Then he stepped to the center of the room, drew a dagger from his belt, and sliced his palm in one swift motion. The scent of alpha blood flooded the air. He let 3 drops fall to the stone floor around Rosalind's chair, then traced a circle with his bleeding hand. Gold runes flared where his blood touched, rising in a thin line of light that enclosed her and Anwen in a ring bright as noon. The scribe stumbled back. Captain Rourke swore under his breath. Lucian's voice carried without effort. "By crown blood and ancestral right, I name Rosalind Frostborn, my protected guest under royal ward." He turned to face the council delegation. Amber deepened in his gaze until something ancient looked out from behind his eyes. "Anyone who insults her insults the crown. Anyone who threatens her threatens the crown. Speak of her as person, not property, or speak elsewhere." Silence dropped hard. Rourke, apparently incapable of self-preservation, muttered, "If the child is truly valuable, it should be tested like contraband at birth." The room went still enough to hear the fire settle. Lucian moved so quickly Rourke had no time to flinch. One moment the captain stood at the edge of the circle, the next Lucian had him by the throat against the wall, not crushing, simply making consequence unmistakable. Rourke's boots scraped stone, his face blanched. You will report to the outer mines before sundown, Lucian said softly, each word edged like steel. You will supervise tunnel reinforcement for one full turning of the moon. You will speak to no one of this woman or her child. If I hear the word contraband in your voice again, I will assume you have forgotten how law works in my house and reteach you publicly. He released him. Rourke staggered, coughing, and dropped to one knee. My king, he rasped. Dismissed. Rourke fled with the speed of a man granted mercy he had not expected. The scribes followed him in near panic. The three matrons remained, stiff with outrage and calculation, but none met Rosalind's eyes now. Matron Elspeth bowed, shallow but unmistakable. The council acknowledges your ruling. You will acknowledge her name, Lucian replied. A pause. Rosalind Frostborn, Elspeth said, clipped. The council acknowledges your ruling. Good, Lucian said. Then we are finished. They withdrew. The door shut behind them with a heavy finality that rang through the infirmary. The bloodline circle dimmed to embers and vanished. Lucian wrapped his cut palm in a strip of linen Anwen handed him without comment. He did not look triumphant. He looked tired and resolved, and oddly careful as he turned back to Rosalind as if expecting her anger as much as relief. You should have let me answer for myself, she said, voice rough. I know. She blinked. That is all you have to say. No. He tied the knot one-handed and met her gaze directly. I should have let you answer first. I chose speed over process because they came to strip your dignity under the cover of procedure, and I would not permit it. If that choice cost me your trust, I will earn it back. Rosalind searched his face for the familiar signs of manipulation, the polished righteousness that always followed male displays of force. She found none. Only a man who had used power like a shield and was willing to be judged for how he held it. The tight knot behind her ribs eased, just enough to breathe around it. Next time, she said, I speak first. A faint, fierce warmth touched his features. Next time, I stand where you point me. For the first time since exile, Rosalind believed that might be true, and she let her hand rest over her belly without bracing for someone to take that choice away. A fist struck the infirmary door 3 times, sharp enough to cut through the quiet that had settled around them. Lucian turned first. Enter. A gate runner stepped inside, snow still clinging to his braids, one knee hitting stone as he bowed. In both hands he held a black wax tablet stamped with the Windrider crest and slashed through with red. Challenge color, not diplomacy. For the crown, the runner said, delivered under truce cry at the eastern gate. They demanded witness to receipt. Lucian took the tablet, broke the seal, and read without expression until his shoulders went rigid beneath his shirt. He passed it to Anwen. You as well. Anwen's lips thinned as her eyes moved across the carved script. She glanced at Rosalind, then back to Lucian. He sent this now, while she is near term. Rosalind pushed herself higher in the chair. Read it aloud. Lucian hesitated. She held his gaze until he inclined his head once. Sebastian Windrider, acting heir of Windrider Command, alleges that you confessed treason against his house and fled judgment. Lucian said, voice flat with control. He claims paternal right over your unborn child. He alleges I have unlawfully detained both mother and heir to manipulate succession. He demands immediate surrender at the border and a public tribunal within 3 nights. The room chilled despite the hearth. Rosalind felt her pulse hammering in her throat, but her voice emerged clear. What does he threaten if refused? Lucian looked back at the tablet. Border villages burned in reprisal. Casualties assigned to your name. A brittle laugh escaped her. He wrote the ending before the trial began. Anwen set the tablet down with careful precision, as if she might otherwise crack it in half. This is extortion under legal language. It is Sebastian, Rosalind said. Legal language is how he sharpens knives. Lucian moved to the table, spread a blank map, and signaled the runner. How many at the gate? 20, my king. Banner escort only. Their speaker said the main force waits beyond visual range. Did they scent fear? The runner blinked, then answered honestly. They scented confidence. Lucian dismissed him and shut the door himself. Rosalind watched him brace both palms on the table, head lowered for a breath that seemed to cost him effort. When he looked up, the king was back in full command, but the mate bond carried enough of his strain that she felt it like an echo under her own ribs. I want every detail you remember, he said, not the accusation, the method. Who handled cups? Who carried messages? Who gains if he owns your daughter on paper? Rosalind stood because sitting made her feel cornered. Pain tugged low in her abdomen, warning and wait, but she ignored it and crossed to the map. He wants merger leverage first, throne leverage second. He forges proof, then calls anyone who questions him disloyal. He already did it with elders. He will do it with Pax. She pointed to the northern trade line. If he takes me publicly, he claims mercy instead of capture. If he takes my child, he claims legitimacy. If he claims both, he can demand oaths from neutral houses who fear civil war more than lies. Anwen murmured, almost to herself. He does not need truth. He needs momentum. Lucian's gaze shifted to Rosalind. You believe he forged witness tablets. I know he did. Can you prove it? She met his eyes. Not with memory alone. Then we find more than memory. The crux stood plain between them. Sebastian did not need to win by force if he could make lawful wolves accept a false story quickly enough. Consequently, every hour now mattered as much as every sword. By nightfall, Lucian's command web had tightened across 3 territories. Couriers rode under Moonmark to allied Pax. Scent trackers combed the paths behind the Windrider delegation. 2 legal archivists were dragged from supper to review oath procedure for challenges involving pregnancy, exile status, and disputed paternity claims. Lucian insisted Rosalind stay in the strategy chamber for each briefing, despite visible discomfort from 2 elders who believed women should be protected from governance by being excluded from it. The first report came before the second bell. A scout captain knelt by the long table, mud and frost caked to his boots. We found a courier corpse 2 miles from Old Quarry Road. No clan marks removed, no theft. Message tube hidden in his boot. He placed 2 clay tablets wrapped in oilcloth before Lucian. Rosalind knew the script style before she touched them. Windrider legal hand, formal enough to pass at distance. The first tablet described her confession in language she would never use, phrases like impurity by admission and voluntary forfeiture of maternal claim. The second was worse, instructions to a Windrider loyalist midwife to apply a heated signet to the infant's shoulder. If natural crown mark absent, then isolate mother during presentation. Anwen swore softly. Lucian did not speak for a long breath. Rosalind's fingers whitened around the tablet edges. He planned to brand her. Lucian took the pieces from her before she could snap them in rage. These are evidence now. She is not his symbol to carve? She will never be in his reach, he said, and the promise held enough force that everyone at the table straightened. Yet promises did not erase fear. That night, as storm wind dragged along the tower stones, Rosalind lay awake in the infirmary and tracked each creak of the corridor floor. Her thoughts would not settle. I am so tired that my bones hum, and still I cannot surrender 1 inch of vigilance. If I sleep deeply, I see his hand reaching for my child. If I stay awake, I hear every rumor crossing these walls and wonder which one will become law by dawn. Lucian asks before he touches, asks before he decides, asks as if my will is not decoration. I keep waiting for the price. There is always a price. But when he stood over those forged tablets, I saw fury without possession. I saw him choose evidence over ego. I want to trust that. I want to step into it and stop bracing for impact. Want is dangerous. Want made me vulnerable once. Want could save me now. I do not know which truth I fear more. A quiet knock sounded. Lucian entered only when she answered. He carried no weapon, only 2 cups of spiced milk and a folded wool wrap. He offered both from arm's length. Anwen said you kept your supper. That counts as victory. She took the cup, suspicious, and moved in equal measure. Do kings usually deliver midnight milk? Only when queens in denial are too stubborn to ask. Despite herself, she barked a short laugh. That title is premature. Temporary, then. He settled in the chair by the hearth again, close enough for her to feel the bond's low thrum, far enough to leave her air. They sat in silence until she spoke. If tribunal is called, he will try to speak over me. Lucian nodded. Then we make a format where he cannot. He will bait you into killing him outside law. I know. She watched his profile in firelight, the scar near his jaw, the stillness he wore like armor. And if I ask to stand in that arena myself? His hand tightened once around his cup. I will argue against it with every breath I have. And if I insist? His gaze met hers, fierce and bare. Then I stand where you point me. At dawn on the second day, pressure widened beyond letters and law. A merchant caravan from the southern pass arrived early, carrying grain and gossip in equal measure. By noon, half the lower ward had heard that Lucian had taken in a disgraced mate, heavy with another alpha's heir. By evening, the rumor sharpened that Stormborn meant to steal Windrider bloodline through seduction and false marks. Someone wanted instability to bloom inside the fortress before any tribunal began. Lucian answered with process, not panic. He posted public notice of pending legal challenge and penalties for rumor forging. He summoned neutral witnesses from 2 allied houses. He ordered every medicinal store recounted and sealed under triple signature, then had Anwen supervise personally. That order saved them. Just after midnight, Anwen stormed into the strategy room, where Rosalind and Lucian were reviewing tribunal clauses. Someone tampered with her tinctures, Anwen said without preamble, holding up a small glass vial. Not enough to kill quickly. Enough to weaken contractions, confuse pulse, and make her appear unstable during testimony. Lucian's chair scraped back so hard it struck stone. Who had access? 4 infirmary aides, 3 attendants, 1 supply clerk. I have them confined separately. Rosalind took the vial and smelled it, bitter beneath mint. Her stomach turned. This is not Windrider stock. This came from within your walls. Anwen's jaw set. Which means he bought someone, or someone came bought. Lucian went very still, and she had learned enough now to recognize that stillness as dangerous. No interrogations until legal witnesses arrive. I want names, times, and chain of custody for every bottle in that room. You will have it, Anwen said, and left at a run. Rosalind set the vial down with deliberate care. He does not need to stab me in an alley. He only needs me discredited in public. Lucian crossed to her, stopped just short of touching. You are not alone in this fight. I know. The words surprised her by sounding true. 3 days passed before the external replies returned. Frostborn did not answer at all. Riverclaw sent cautious support for lawful hearing. Ashvale committed 2 neutral witnesses and 1 oath reader. Windrider sent a second demand, louder than the first. Surrender mother and child at once, or accept tribunal at Stormborn Moonstone under full pack attendance. Lucian accepted tribunal terms at sunset, with 1 amendment carved into public record. The right of moon witness would be open to both parties, including exiles. Rosalind read that line twice, then a third time. He had given her a weapon Sebastian might not expect her to wield. The strike came before dawn the next morning. First, horns from the eastern wall, long and urgent, then bell chains through the keep, then boots pounding every corridor as soldiers moved to stations. Rosalind was halfway into her cloak when another contraction seized her, sharper than any she had felt in 2 days. She gripped the bedpost until it passed. Anwen appeared in the doorway with 2 guards and fear she did not bother to hide. Windrider force at the gate, not 20, 200 visible, More in tree cover. They brought tribunal stones and a public crier. Sebastian is demanding immediate presentation. Lucian arrived behind her in armor half-buckled, hair damp from a hurried wash, amber hard in his eyes. Inner keep. Now. Rosalind shook her head once. If I hide, he writes cowardice into record before sunrise. You are in active labor. I am in intermittent labor. There is a difference and you know it. Another horn sounded, closer this time. A runner skidded into view and dropped to one knee, chest heaving. My king, border village Lark Hollow sent fire signal. 3 granaries burned in the night. Survivors report Windrider cloak seen fleeing north. Sebastian had moved from threat to action. Civil blood was already in the ledger. Lucian closed his eyes for half a heartbeat, then opened them and made 3 decisions in one breath. Send riders to Lark Hollow with healers and grain escort. Double gate shield. Assemble legal witnesses in the Moon Hall. No engagement unless attacked. The runner bolted. Rosalind stepped into her boots, pain and resolve braided tight. He wants me broken before tribunal starts. I will not give him that. Lucian faced her fully. If you collapse in that arena, he wins a different way. Then I will not collapse. Their bond thrummed, hot and strained, 2 wills colliding with no room for softness. Outside, the fortress roared with preparation. Inside, the next contraction began, deep and undeniable, and Rosalind breathed through it while holding his gaze. When it passed, she straightened and placed Lucian's hand over the hard curve of her belly. Their daughter shifted against his palm like a deliberate answer. Get me to the Moon Hall, she said, and bring every lie he ever carved into clay. Lucian's fingers pressed once against her belly, then lifted as if releasing a vow into the air between them. Stay at my left, he said, already turning toward the corridor. If your knees weaken, you tell me before you fall. Not after. Rosalind nodded, breath measured, jaw set. Anwen wrapped a thick wool cloak around her shoulders and tucked 2 small vials into an inner pocket. For pain, if I say so, Anwen murmured, and for proof, if you need to show them what they tried to feed you. The fortress shook with movement as they crossed into the Moon Hall passage. Horns called from the walls, doors slammed, boots struck stone in converging rhythms that made the air feel charged. At the final arch, Lucian halted his guard line with one lifted hand. Beyond the threshold, the Moon Hall opened wide and circular, its central dais cut from pale moonstone veined with silver. Tiered benches rose around it, already filling with allied witnesses, storm-born captains, and Windrider envoys, who had pushed inside under tribunal right. Sebastian stood at the opposite edge of the dais in formal black, unarmored, one hand resting on a sealed casket of tablets as if on scripture. He looked thinner than she remembered, but sharper, with that same polished grief mask he used when he wanted cruelty to pass as duty. His gaze found Rosalind and dropped, deliberately, to her abdomen. You bring her into law while she is in labor, he called, voice carrying. How compassionate your crown has become. She asked to stand here, Lucian said. Sebastian spread his hands. A compromised woman can ask for many things. It does not make consent legally sound. Murmurs rippled through the hall. The public crier beside Sebastian unrolled a strip of hide and shouted the charges, each phrase honed to stain. Poison, adultery, theft of succession, unlawful detention by storm-born command. By the time he reached paternal reclamation, Rosalind's hands were trembling, not from fear alone, but from a contraction building low and hard. It hit before she reached the dais. Pain locked her hips, stole her breath, bent her forward against her own will. Gasps rose from the benches. Sebastian lifted his chin, scenting weakness like a hunting dog. There, he said softly for everyone to hear. She cannot even remain upright. Suspend testimony. Transfer custody to Windrider medical oversight. 2 Windrider guards stepped forward in practiced sync. Lucian's aura slammed through the hall before steel cleared leather. Another step, and you lose the foot. The guards stopped, but the disruption had done its work. Voices collided, legal terms shouted over rank commands, and somewhere to her right, a stormborn soldier dragged a man from the crowd by the collar after catching a hidden blade. The crier screamed for order. Anwen gripped Rosalind's elbow and leaned close. "Your waters have broken," she said, calm and urgent. "Now, we need a screen and hot cloths." Rosalind looked up through sweat and noise and saw Sebastian smile, faint and satisfied. He had wanted spectacle. He had wanted her reduced to a body while men argued ownership. Not this time. They moved her behind a hastily raised linen screen near the dais, close enough to hear every word spoken in her name. Contractions came fast, no longer uncertain, each one tearing through her spine with blunt force. Anwen worked with 2 assistants, steady hands, clipped instructions, no panic. On the other side of the cloth, Sebastian read from his forged confession tablets with ceremonial precision, each lie presented as patient fact. I am on a stone floor with pain splitting me open while he rewrites my life one sentence at a time. I can hear wolves choosing which version of me is easier to believe. Breathe. Push, when Anwen says. Do not let his voice become the frame around your daughter's first breath. I am not a vessel for his legitimacy. I am not a scandal to be processed. I am blood and will and memory, and every scar he called evidence of my guilt is proof I survived him. This child arrives into noise, into danger, into law sharpened against women, and still she arrives. I will meet her with my own hands. I will stand, whether stitched by pain or fury, and I will drag truth into the center of this hall if I have to leave footprints of it. By the time the third horn from the gate faded into the rafters, a sharp cry cut through the tribunal noise and silenced the room. Anwen lifted the newborn, swift and sure, wrapped her in warmed linen, and laid her against Rosalind's chest. Tiny, furious, perfect. Dark hair damp against a small skull, fists opening and closing as if already refusing surrender. Rosalind's breath broke on a sob she did not try to hide. Then the infant turned, and fire gold light flared on her left shoulder. Not surface paint, not burn. A living mark beneath the skin, the stormborn crown sigil, luminous for 3 heartbeats, pulsing in rhythm with her cry before settling into a soft ember. The hall went dead quiet. Rosalind stood while her legs still shook. Anwen started to protest. Rosalind shook her head once, adjusted the linen sling across her chest, and stepped out from behind the screen carrying her daughter herself. Every eye followed. Sebastian's composure cracked for the first time. Rosalind walked to the moonstone dais and did not wait to be recognized. "I invoke the right of moon witness," she said, voice raw but clear, "as exile, as mother, and as accused." A council elder from Ashvale rose, startled. "That right is rarely granted under postpartum." "It is law," Rosalind cut in, "or admit before all pacts that law applies only when men are comfortable." No one answered that. She drew Anwen's birthing knife from her belt, sliced her palm, and pressed blood to the moonstone. Silver light traveled outward in thin lines, forming the witness lattice around the dais. The oath reader stepped forward despite himself and spoke the formal confirmation. Moonstone accepts initiation, testimony now bound to scent, blood, and declared oath. Rosalind turned first to Sebastian. "You claimed confession. Produce original witness tablet and witness body." Sebastian gestured to his casket. "Already submitted." Lucian signaled, and a stormborn scribe carried forward the tablets recovered from the dead courier, plus the poison vials from her chambers and Anwen's chain of custody record. "Counter evidence," Lucian said, authenticated by 3 neutral signatures. Rosalind held up one tablet, reading the line that instructed a loyalist midwife to brand a false sigil if no natural mark appeared. Audible disgust moved through the benches. She handed the tablet to the oath reader. "Read it aloud," she said. He did. No one spoke over him. Sebastian recovered enough to sneer. Forgery planted by Stormborn. Rosalind nodded toward the lower benches where two figures were escorted into view, the supply clerk and one infirmary aide, both under restraint, both pale. Then explain why your coin stamp was found in their quarters. Explain why Lark Hollow survivors identified Windrider cloaks leaving their granary fires. Explain why your own courier carried your seal hidden in his boot. Sebastian's jaw flexed. You have no right to interrogate me. I have every right, she said. You tried to steal my child. He lunged verbally for higher ground. That child is Windrider by prior claim. Rosalind turned her body so the infant's shoulder faced the tribunal. The crown mark brightened in answer to moonstone light, unmistakable. Prior claim ends where blood truth begins, she said. You wanted a brand, because you knew this would appear without your hand. A stunned hush broke into argument, then into demand. Witnesses called for formal ruling. Windrider captains shouted procedural abuse. Sebastian's crier attempted to drown them out until Lucian stripped the scroll from his grip and dropped it to the floor. Rosalind lifted her chin. I request single combat under tribunal law. Not to settle paternity. That is settled. To settle treason, attempted infanticide, and oath perjury by the accuser. Shock moved through the chamber like a wave. Lucian stared at her, pain and pride warring across his face. You gave birth minutes ago, he said, low enough for her alone. You promised to stand where I point you. His eyes closed briefly. Then he nodded once and took the infant from her, with hands that looked too large and impossibly careful. I stand. The combat ring was drawn in salt and moon ash on the lower floor. Rosalind took two short blades, lighter than standard issue, and rolled her shoulders against fresh pain. Across from her, Sebastian accepted a long knife and a smirk. This is your grandstand, he said, bleeding and shaking in front of everyone. This is me finishing what you started. He attacked fast, expecting hesitation. Rosalind pivoted, let his first strike glance off her left blade, and answered with a cut across his forearm that drew a hiss and anger. He drove her backward with heavier swings, trying to force her off balance, trying to make postpartum weakness visible. She gave ground when she chose, not when he took it. The bond at her center hummed with cold clarity. Frostborn wardcraft, long dismissed as decorative women's work, answered her pulse. When Sebastian lunged toward the cradle stand where Lucian had set the baby within shield line, Rosalind slammed her palm to stone and whispered the old root command her grandmother had taught her over winter basins. Ice flashed across the floor under Sebastian's boots. He slipped, cursed, recovered. She struck, carving his knife hand. He came harder, breathing ragged now, mask gone. You were mine when I found you in ash, he snarled, driving her toward the ring edge. Rosalind caught his wrist between both blades, twisted and kicked his knee. I was never yours, she said through her teeth, only unprotected. His knife clattered away. She hooked his arm, drove him down to one knee on Moonstone, and called Frost again. A chain of pale ice rose from the ring markings, coiling his wrist to the stone. He thrashed, but each pull tightened it. He spat at her feet. That mark can still be turned. Rosalind stepped back, chest heaving, and looked to Lucian. He did not move until she gave a single, unmistakable nod. Lucian entered the ring with tribunal blade in hand and King's voice in full register. Sebastian Windrider, by witness law and Moonstone assent, you are convicted of treason, attempted infanticide, arson by proxy, and oath perjury. Sentence is death. Sebastian opened his mouth for one last appeal. The moonstone beneath him flared and blackened his forged tablets where they lay on the evidence table. Clay split, script burned to ash without flame. Gasps broke into cries. The oath reader dropped to his knees, shouting confirmation of false oath rejection. Lucian's blade fell in one clean stroke. Silence held for a heartbeat, then another. Rosalind did not look away until Sebastian's body was removed from the ring and the ice chain melted into harmless water at her feet. Only then did she turn toward her daughter, toward Lucian, toward a hall full of wolves who had just watched law bend toward truth because she forced it there. Only when Sebastian's body had been carried beyond the moon hall and the tribunal blade washed in salt water did Rosalind allow her legs to shake. Lucian reached her in 2 strides, their daughter bundled against his chest, and Anwen was there at once, pressing clean cloth to Rosalind's palm and checking the fresh tear at her side where Sebastian's knife had grazed fabric but not flesh. "You are done fighting tonight," Anwen said. Rosalind took her daughter, inhaled milk-sweet skin and storm cedar scent braided together, and answered without looking away from the infant's face. "Tonight, yes." By evening, the burial fires burned in the lower court. Tribunal law required witnesses for the record, and Rosalind stood through all of it wrapped in a black cloak, while the oath reader recited charges and sentence into the wind. The poisoned vials were sealed in glass and entered into Crown Archive under triple signature: Anwen, Ashvale's elder, and Riverclaw's witness. The recovered coin stamp from the infirmary aide's quarters was matched to Windrider Mint and logged. The shattered fragments of Sebastian's casket and his blackened forged tablets were collected in separate iron boxes, marked false oath evidence, and locked in the legal vault below the Moon Hall for any future challenge. Nothing vanished into rumor. Every piece was named. Rourke's statement arrived from the outer mines before moonrise, rough handwriting on slate. He confirmed who had demanded contraband testing and accepted censure without appeal. Matron Elspeth submitted formal acknowledgement that Rosalind had been addressed as property in council hearing, and that the Crown rebuke stood lawful. The supply clerk and infirmary aide confessed under witness circle that Windrider Coin had purchased access to medicine stores. Larkhollow's second report came by runner just after the first fire collapsed inward. 3 dead, 12 injured, grain convoy received, healers on site, attackers identified by cloak pattern and boot nails consistent with Windrider quartermasters. Lucian read each report aloud to Rosalind before sealing it. The crux that had nearly torn 3 territories open was no longer floating in accusation. It sat in records, ink and clay and sworn voices. When the last fire sank to embers, Lucian led her to his private chamber and closed the door with deliberate quiet. No guards inside, no ceremony witnesses, only low lamplight, wool rugs, and a cradle Anwen had ordered carried in while tribunal still raged. Their daughter slept there now. One tiny fist tucked under her chin, the faint crown mark at her shoulder no brighter than dawn through ice. Rosalind stood by the hearth, suddenly unsteady in a way battle had not caused. Bruises were blooming under her sleeves. Her body still remembered labor in pulsing aches. Her heart remembered everything at once. Lucian stopped an arm's length away. "Rosalind." She lifted her gaze. "I am asking clearly." His voice was rough with restraint. "Do you want the claiming tonight?" She held his eyes and felt the bond between them, strong but still waiting at its final threshold. "Yes." He nodded once, but did not move closer. "I will ask again. You can refuse me now, tomorrow, forever. Do you want this?" "Yes," she said, steadier. A long breath left him. He unfastened the clasp at his throat and pulled the collar of his shirt aside, baring the line of his neck where pulse beat hard under skin. Not command, offering. "Then choose me first," he said, power before gratitude. Her chest tightened. She stepped forward and laid her fingers against his throat, feeling heat, life, trust placed in her hands by a king who had once been untouchable to everyone. He closed his eyes for one heartbeat and opened them again, amber deepening. "Last time," he said quietly, "do you consent to being marked as my mate?" "Yes, Lucian." He bowed his head, waiting for her hand at the back of his neck, waiting for her to guide him. When she did, he moved with reverence rather than hunger, mouth at the junction of her neck and shoulder where pulse fluttered wild. The first pressure of his teeth was careful, almost a question. She breathed out, tilted toward him, and answered with her body. He bit deeper. Pain flared bright and clean, a sharp line that made her fingers clutch his shoulders. Then the flare changed, heat spilling through her veins in rolling waves, not erasing hurt, but transforming it into something vast and alive. Gold fire traced under her skin from the mark point down her arm, across her sternum, through the center of her chest where fear had lived for months. She heard her own breath catch, heard his low, shaken sound against her skin. The bond snapped fully into place. It was not abstract. It was tangible as stone and storm. Images poured through, not stolen, shared. Lucian at 17 kneeling beside a brother in arms he could not save. Lucian refusing a council bride because duty without choice felt like a chain. Lucian on a winter ridge 3 nights ago, scenting blood and snow and realizing the woman before him was the one his soul had recognized before his mind could name it. In return, she felt him take in her memories, the moon oath clearing, her mother's lowered gaze, the chant that had followed her beyond the ward stakes, the cold that taught her how exile sounds when it has a rhythm. He did not flinch from any of it. His arms came around her as the mark sealed, runes along his forearms and the side of her throat igniting in thin golden lines that pulsed once, twice, then settled to a warm glow beneath skin. "Mine," he whispered, voice breaking. Rosalind's mouth curved against his temple, fierce and trembling. "Yours." She pulled back enough to see him, then slid her hand to the nape of his neck and guided him down, reversing the angle. He made a startled sound when her teeth found the place over his pulse. She bit, not as gently as he had, because she needed him to feel what she had survived and chosen anyway. His knees nearly gave. He caught the bedpost with one hand and laughed once under the strain, astonished and undone. Heat surged through the bond in a second wave, richer, deeper, like river ice breaking at thaw. She tasted salt and cedar, heard him whisper her name like prayer and oath together. "Yours," he said against her hair. "Mate." She rested her forehead against his and answered, "Mine, mate." For a long moment neither moved. Their daughters sighed in the cradle, and the settled bond wrapped all 3 of them in one quiet field of certainty. No coercion, no spectacle, only chosen belonging. Lucian lifted Rosalind with care and sat with her on the edge of the bed, her back against his chest, both of them watching the cradle as the marks cooled from flame to steady warmth. By the second week of October, the great hall smelled of wax, ink, and wet wool as Allied delegates filled every bench for the accord hearing Rosalind had drafted herself. She stood at the central table in silver gray, mark visible at her shoulder, and read each clause aloud so no wolf could claim ignorance later. "No public rejection right shall carry legal force without evidentiary hearing before neutral witnesses," she said, voice ringing cleanly. "Any pregnant wolf who requests sanctuary receives temporary protection regardless of pack origin until adjudication is complete. Tampering with medical care during tribunal period is crown-level treason. False paternity claims against a minor are prosecutable across territorial lines." Riverclaw's envoy signed first. Ashvale followed. Even the Frostborn seat, empty for 2 days, was finally filled by Elder Tomas, older and smaller than she remembered. He did not ask forgiveness. He placed Frostborn's seal beside Stormborn's and said, "Horse. Your mother watched from the outer gate at dawn and left before court opened. She sent your rank beads back in this pouch. She had no message." Rosalind took the pouch, felt the smooth carved beads through leather and nodded once. "Then silence will stand as her answer." She did not break. She moved to the next signature. That evening, in a coronation witnessed by every Allied banner, Lucian knelt so the crown-bearer could place matched circlets on both their heads at the same height. Not above, beside. The herald named her Luna Queen and chief arbiter of asylum tribunals by independent authority, and the hall answered with one united strike of fist to chest. At the next full moon, they carried their daughter to the same moonstone dais where lies had burned away. Anwen stood at Rosalind's right with a healer's braid threaded in silver for the occasion. Rourke, thinner from the mines and newly sober in demeanor, held outer rank and kept his gaze respectfully forward. Matron Elspeth read the blessing record without stumbling on Rosalind's title. Elder Tomas witnessed for Frostborn. Riverclaw and Ashvale witnessed for the Accord. Lucian laid one hand over the infant's back. Rosalind laid hers atop his. Moonlight touched the child's shoulder and the crown mark answered in soft gold. Heir of Stormborn and Frostborn line, the oath reader declared, by union, not conquest. Their daughter yawned through the formal words, then fell asleep between their joined scents as if peace were the most natural law in the world.